afternoon. Please stand. Let's see you. Yes, he's got family standing with him. And then we have another young man that we're now going to turn around for Bob. Can you just get Bob turned around, please? He's going to try to scooch himself around. Bob, 97 years young. And it is so fitting that someone born in Earth Month is a month that we generally can also celebrate this greatness that he brings. We are going to start our program this afternoon. As we said, this is a program celebrating ecology justice. We have our youth who are going to be truly leading the way, and we are grateful for that. And I know they have their own introductions that's happening for the committee. I am so proud to stand before you as your pastor, Reverend Valencia Norman, here at First Presbyterian Trinity Church, South Orange, where we have ministered to our community over 180 years. So it's been a very long time that we have stood here in this space and consider ourselves partners in our community of South Orange and beyond. A quick question, Gregory, are you going to offer another prayer, or should I begin with a prayer? What's that? Prayer. Okay, that's what you're going to do. So glad that you want to come in. I'm going to toss this away so that I can focus. Let us pray. We're all good? Thank you. Thank you. God of the universe, we bless you. We bless you in your glory, and bless those coming behind them. And so today we begin to speak about your environment. We speak about all those actions that we've taken, oh God, that as a people sometimes deny that your call to us to be keepers of this great planet has led to us being destroyers of your creation. So we pray, oh God, we pray for the access of this great creation, that it can be shared equally among all people, for all communities, for all nations. We pray for the fruit of the earth, the wealth of the land, the abundance of the sky and the sea, for the homes that you create for us to live in, the spaces that you ask us to care for. We ask that you help each one of us serve all people so that all may be richly blessed, all can live in the bounty of your creation, and all will experience the freedom from famine, poverty, oppression, and also the earth's rejection of how we have continued to rob its resources. Keep us, we pray. Amen.
Okay, my name is Samantha. I am a newly elected deacon here at FPT. This piece is called Goodness of God, as performed by C.C. Winans. I love you, Lord.
it was 10 years ago that we started the Yamba Manly Lecture, and we called this the 9th one simply because, obviously during the pandemic, we didn't hold that meeting that year. So the Mission and Community Committee of First Presbyterian Trinity is the one that mainly organizes this for the church, and it's a symposium in recognition of our two prominent guests who are Dr. Manley and Dr. Yamba, as Reverend has let you know at the beginning. Let me tell you a little bit about them. Dr. Manley is the founder and president of the Center for Global Responsibility and Professor Emeritus of Political Science at Seton Hall University in South Orange. He is one of the several Seton Hall faculty members who laid down the foundations for diplomacy and international relations. He is an active member of our church, and you all have met him, Dr. Manley, sitting right here. Hi, Dr. More about Dr. Yamba. He served as president of Essex County College, Newark, for over 35 years. He is now president emeritus, and he is known for his extensive leadership that defines the college and continues to be an unrelenting advocate for the power and promise of education. The annual lecture is consistent in part with the church's mission to being a prominent light in our community through acts of service and advocacy in Christ's name, and fostering passion for faith in action so that individuals are empowered to give back to the world. This year our lecture today is on ecology, justice, youth leading the way, and protecting our earth. And we thought that this would be a timely topic to use to cover what people are thinking about today, what we're worried about as far as our young people living in the world in the future and protecting it for us and for themselves. We all felt that rumble a few weeks ago, and then we saw the sky darken last week, a little bit here anyway. And we know that our ancestors in the past probably would have sacrificed a small animal, maybe a large animal, or maybe a young maiden for something like that. Of course, we've all come very far ahead, and we know that these days, that's just the way the world moves. Things are always changing. Our earth is not static, it's always moving forward, and things are always taking place. There was a time when we all lived in the Ice Age, or even if humans were here, we don't even know how many of us were around during that time. And obviously the earth is getting warmer, and we're just wondering whether or not we're doing things to speed that up and make it worse for ourselves. So we had these young people here to talk to us today about that, and let us know what their thoughts are and what their passions are and beliefs as far as protecting the earth. So I'm going to bring forward Ms. Susan Haig. Susan, where are you? There she is, and she's going to introduce our moderator, who will then bring our guest speakers up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. It's a great pleasure to welcome as our moderator, Dr. Olivia Lewis-Chang. She's back here at First Presbyterian Trinity Church. She was the keynote speaker for our Fall Harvest Festival and had so much to share. She is a great community leader. She serves on the South Orange Village Council. She was a co-founder of the South Orange Community Garden. Her doctorate is in psychology, and she maintains a practice somehow full-time as a psychologist. And she has headed major flower planting projects in the Seton Hill Village community where she lives. In addition to her committee assignments on Village Council, she and her husband are parenting their nephew, Obi, right there. A freshman at Columbia High School, Zionist and horticulturalist. I hope that's accurate, is it? I think so, yeah. So welcome, a warm welcome to Olivia. Thank you so much for taking time at this very busy spring season to serve as our moderator for this timely dialogue during Earth Month. Over to you.
Hi. That's a little loud. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back here. Thank you, Susan. And thanks to the church for having me back. It's always a pleasure to be here and to speak to our planet and our environment. pleasure to hear what every young person has to say. So, without much ado, we will welcome our first person. Of course, we are excited to see young people leading us. Our first speaker is Shreya Iyer, a freshman at Milburn High School and a participant in the Columbia University Earth Center's Eco Ambassador Program. Shreya is passionate about ecology and justice and concerned about the unequal impacts of our ecology crisis on vulnerable communities. Shreya, thank you for sharing with us your interests and activities and what changes in society you'd like to see. Take it away.
Alright, throughout history, we have fought for our right to life, our right to free speech, our right to property, our right to liberty, our right to happiness, and our right to equality. But I must say, what might as well be considered the most important right, our right to equality, has been in recent years infringed upon to an unfathomable extent. And now, whether an intentional action or unforeseen consequence, our present world thoroughly embodies George Orwell's chilling statement. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. This very world is what the concept of ecological justice serves to combat. And as the idea of recognizing and rectifying the unequal burdens of environmental crises on marginalized communities and the natural world, the approach of ecological justice must be brought to the forefront of climate change discussion. Ecological justice, however, is quite a broad topic, so today I'll be talking about specifically the role of pollinators in our lives and how we can give them the precious rights we give ourselves, as well as the disproportionate amount of impact faced by marginalized communities, specifically women in developing countries. Pollinators play a crucial role in the balance of healthy ecosystems, and without them, the world would cease to exist. With their spreading of pollen to aid in plant reproduction, they are not only essential for plants, but an extension for all herbivores, carnivores, and us humans. And of course, we must also consider the medicinal properties of pollinators and the food they provide. So clearly, we need pollinators, so why not treat them like they're human? Just for a second, let's consider the most essential aspects of life to us: food and shelter. Now, as of yet, these two aspects of our life have not been affected by climate change to that great of extent. That is, compared to pollinators. While we eat happily in our homes, bees and monarchs struggle to find the nectar that was once easily accessible to them. While we enjoy the luxuries of heaters in these cold times, pollinators struggle to find even the simplest shelters, all destroyed by climate change. First, we must consider their food source, which is, for the most part, native plants. Native plants have adapted to the harsh climates of their regions over time, making them more suited towards survival. However, with the recent drastic contrast from the usual weather, plant health has been compromised, and their growing and blooming seasons have been altered, both of which cause pollinators to struggle with finding food during their activity periods. This fight for food is only further intensified when we humans make the decision to get rid of the native plants that they rely on for food, replacing them with wonderful flowers that struggle to survive a week before wilting. So, the solution? Simply plant more native plants. Not only does it provide to be a reliable food source for pollinators, but it's also a more economically sustainable alternative for buying flowers as well. Native plants are adapted to local climates, and thus grow easily, with much less human intervention needed. And by doing this, you are also providing reliable and safe shelters for pollinators to house themselves. Butterfly larvae, as an example, often live and feed exclusively on one plant, usually native plants. And by providing them with the shelters they desire, you are fostering and providing for the next generation of pollinators. Now, to address the changing blooming times of flowers and corresponding to the pollinator activity periods, the solution is equally simple. All we must do is choose to plant flowers with overlapping flowering periods from February to October, thereby allowing bees and other pollinators to continually forage in gardens. However, this issue of lack of food due to climate change is faced by marginalized communities, specifically women in developing countries as well. In many regions, women bear a disproportionate responsibility for securing food, water, and fuel. As such, agriculture is the most important sector of employment for women in low and lower middle income countries. However, because of the increased number of droughts and erratic rainfalls, women as agricultural workers and primary providers work harder to secure income and resources for their families. This further adds pressure on girls, who are often forced to drop out of school to help their mothers manage the increased burden, thereby jeopardizing any hopes for gender equality in these regions, with less girls being educated as well. And seeing as climate change is a threat multiplier, meaning that it escalates social, political, and economic tensions, women and girls are often faced with increased vulnerabilities to all forms of gender-based violence. Furthermore, when disasters strike, women are less likely to survive and more likely to be injured due to long-standing gender inequalities built into governments, inhibiting their access to relief and assistance, and thereby threatening their livelihoods as well. And with climate change increasing events of extreme heat as well, as well as the ability of vector-borne illnesses to spread, research indicates that both increased incidences of stillbirth and worse maternal and neonatal incomes. So, what is the solution to this pressing problem? Admittedly, our power in the situation is rather limited, given that we have no power nor influence over foreign governments or the cultural practices in certain areas. However, what we can do is support organizations that fight for women empowerment through education and an increased access to healthcare resources. And what makes this approach even more convincing is that with more access to education, family planning, and birth control, women have the ability to choose how many children they want and when they want to have them. Reports show that with this information, women often choose to have less children and have them later in life. And in both rural and urban areas, slower population growth relieves stress on ecosystems, allowing resources to recover from overuse. So, don't look at climate change solely as a change in the weather pattern, but rather a multifaceted issue that reaches beyond the boundaries of countries, beyond the divisions of rich and poor, human and not. This is a problem we must tackle together, while paying heed to those who face the brunt of the consequences. Thank you.
Thanks, Shreya. So I think Shreya raises for us the questions that we have in our little town in Seton Village. And if you look around South Arlington, Maplewood, we are in the process of planting more native trees. If you visited Grove Park, you probably know that we've had to remove over 20 ash trees, and we're in the process of planting. So we encourage residents and non-residents to help us as we green our planet and encourage pollinators. Shreya, I think you probably know that oak trees are the biggest sustainers of pollinators for us in this part of the country. Thanks for your presentation. Next, we warmly welcome Ishan Akula, a junior at Milburn High School. Ishan is especially interested in ways that financial innovation can help advance sustainable developmental goals, known as SDGs, around the world. There are 17 goals that many countries agreed upon more than 10 years ago. Ishan is also an eco-ambassador with the Columbia University Earth Institute and has attended international conferences. Thank you, Ishan, for speaking to us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I want to talk about the power of small steps and the potential to lead to big changes, especially in the context of environmental sustainability. Let's imagine a single drop of water. On its own, it seems insignificant, but when many drops come together, they can form powerful oceans that can shape continents. Like these water droplets, each small action we take can contribute to a massive impact on our planet's health. Let's consider a practical example. Using a reusable water bottle, by choosing to refill rather than repurchase, we can prevent approximately 156 plastic water bottles annually from ending up in landfills and oceans. Now imagine if everybody in this room made that change. The numbers start to speak volumes. This isn't just about reducing waste. It's a statement. It's about showing that you value our natural resources and that you're committed to protecting them. Now, let's shift our focus from these actions to what drives them, our motivation. Each of you have the power to make choices that contribute to a larger solution. The key is to recognize that no action is too small and no collective effort is too insignificant. It's about starting somewhere, anywhere, whether it's choosing sustainable products, conserving water, or simply educating a friend about the benefits of sustainability. It all counts. I encourage you to ask yourselves, what kind of impact do I want to have? How can my actions today shape a better tomorrow? These aren't just rhetorical questions, they're calls to action. Your choices create ripples, and these ripples can build into waves of change. This journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, a small, seemingly trivial step. But as more of us take these steps, we move closer to a profound change. We must believe in the cumulative power of our small actions. In conclusion, embrace the role that we play in this interconnected world. Embrace the power of small steps. Let's not wait for others to lead the way. The responsibility does not lie with someone else, it lies with each of us. Here today, I urge you to take that step, to make that choice, and to inspire others to do the same. Thank you.
Thanks, Isha. So Isha raises for us the issues that many of us say sometimes it's too big or it's too complicated. And so it starts with reusing water bottles. It starts with recycling clothes, not being so swayed to buy everything new, buying clothes made from sustainable products like recycled plastic. Thanks for raising these issues for us. We'd like to welcome Dr. Colin Evans. Who's joining us from Ithaca, New York. He received his PhD in atmospheric sciences from Cornell University in 2022 and is a postdoctoral researcher at Cornell's Northeastern Regional Climate Center. His primary research was in how droughts develop in the Southwest and Northeast U.S., the trajectory of the solar eclipse totality. Colin, thanks so much for being with us today and sharing some of your research and educational work.
Well, thank you so much for having me, everybody. Dr. Colin Evans, I'm a postdoc at the Northeast Regional Climate Center at Cornell. And before I get started, secondly, I just want to touch briefly on the science of climate change and what's happening in the Northeast. So to start, I think it's a good place in climate science talk to start is that, of course, climate change is real. What we're looking at here is atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration basically for the last 70 million years. And what I've highlighted here is the present level. We're currently sitting about 425 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, one thing I hear a lot as a climate scientist is, well, what's the big deal? Climate has changed before. And of course it has. The climate is always evolving. And you can see here, these are our atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations, much higher, almost 2 or 3 times higher than what we're dealing with right now. So of course the climate has changed before. That's not the problem. The problem that we're dealing with right now is the rate of change. Here we're still looking at carbon dioxide concentrations now for the last just 800,000 years. And this solid straight line is the carbon dioxide we've put into the atmosphere over the last 200 years or so. And as you can see on this graph, even over 800,000 year period, this is a straight line. The amount of from independent organizations. This is the United Kingdom. NOAA, of course, is our National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration. This one is NASA. This is a European agency. This one's Japanese, and this is UC Berkeley. And they all show the exact same thing, taking independent observations with different methodologies, all coming to the same conclusion, is that we are rapidly warming the Earth. And the Northeast is by no means immune to that. So this is NASA data, and it's focused just now on the Northeast, showing, basically the same information. It's changes to yearly temperatures, and you can very clearly see rising temperatures. Last year, 2023, we were 1.808 degrees warmer than our climate norm. So we are continuing to warm. The last 10 months have all set temperature records. April 2024, forecasting will be the warmest April on record. And we're seeing the effects of that. We're seeing historic flooding in Vermont. We are seeing frequent flooding of Boston Harbor. Last year, you may all remember when New York City was shrouded in wildfire smoke from Canada, of all places, because of this abnormally dry season that they had. And we know that our governments are taking this seriously. New York alone is spending over $1 billion to fight the effects of climate change. And I know New Jersey is also at the forefront of climate change adaptation and mitigation. And I know New Jersey is one of the first school systems in the country to require climate change education in public schools, which is an excellent move. And focusing even on smaller detail here, we're looking at climate change projections for South Orange, New Jersey. And we're looking at average daily maximum temperatures. And this red line is our higher emission scenario. We call it business as usual, so nothing changes, and we continue to burn fossil fuels and emit toxins into the air, which is the path we are currently on. We're looking at huge temperature increases by the end of this century. And what worries me on the effects of people and health are extreme temperature days. So here we're looking at days where there would be a maximum temperature above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. For you all in South Orange, you have very few in the historical record, very few days where it gets that hot. But if climate change continues unabated, you're looking at over 20 days by the end of the century where you're having days above 100 degrees, which really puts at risk our vulnerable populations, our elderly, people with disabilities, livestock in particular that can't handle that kind of temperature extremes. So these are dangerous things that we're talking about here. Now, there's a lot of misinformation and blatant lying out there in regards to the science of climate change. So these are some of the resources I would recommend. And I'll make these available if anybody wants to look at these further. These are all reputable sites and agencies to get information regarding climate change. And there's just my contact information, and I'll take questions, I guess, after the event. Thank you.
Hi, Colin. So I have one question that comes out of your presentation. Sorry. If you ask the gardeners in South Orange, so I run the South Orange Community Garden, and one of the things that we're noticing in the garden is that our raised beds, the boxes are lasting less and less years. And so maybe you can global warming and to help keep our planet less warm. Maybe you can speak to that for us.
So when you mean your boxes aren't lasting as long, do you mean like physically the what you're building is lasting as long, or like the plants aren't lasting as long?
We're seeing more storms and more floods and bad weather.
Yeah, so that's definitely a problem. One of the consequences of climate change are these swings and extremes as well. So not only are we getting warmer, we're seeing these extremes. So, for example, like when Texas was blanketed with a huge ice storm that was unprecedented. Those are kinds of extremes that we're talking about. And that those are really hard to predict. And so if you're like a community gardener, that's a really difficult adaptation to overcome. And in that case, one of the mitigation efforts that I've seen taking, that folks have been taking are to build more greenhouses that are more susceptible, not susceptible, so, wow, I can't speak. That are more manageable against those extreme variations that'll keep a more temperate climate. And I think that's part of the solution to climate change is more locally grown produce using greenhouses.
Would you also advise the ordinary citizen to buy local? Does that help us with the emission or lowering emission? Do you want to address that?
Absolutely, absolutely, when you can. But as Sharia was pointing out, ecological justice, climate justice, environmental justice, access to those things is very limited depending on where you live, and that's a barrier for a lot of folks. Is not only access but cost as well. So it's like one of those things where if you can are able to buy locally, definitely it's better for the environment.
Thanks. You gonna stick around till the end?
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next presenter. I think the next presenter is Alania Friedman, a junior at Columbia High School in Maplewood. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Who is also the co-president of the school's environmental club. Alania is a member of the Maplewood Environmental Advisory Committee in Maplewood and Maplewood Town Council, and she's working to establish a shade tree advisory committee for her village. She's an intern with Replenish, a nonprofit organization that expedites the ordering and planting of native trees and saplings or seedlings. Amidst all of this, Alania is a special science research. She's in a special science research program at Columbia High School. I just want to also mention that Alania is our recent recipient of our Sheroes Award from South Orange during the Women's History Month. So we've honored her before, and we really look forward to all the great work that Alania will do. Your turn.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be on this panel, and I'm very excited to be speaking with you all today about trees and how critically they are important to our environment and protect the earth for our future. One of the primary threats to the future of our planet is the climate crisis and global warming. Trees are a crucial part of combating global warming and promoting a healthy environment. Trees mitigate air pollution, provide wildlife habitats, and reduce flooding. They also lower temperatures by providing shade and taking in water through their roots and releasing it as cool vapor gas from their leaves. Trees produce oxygen, which we all need to breathe, and they do this through the process of photosynthesis, which is a process by which a tree absorbs water and carbon dioxide from their surrounding environment and converts it into oxygen and glucose. The tree then emits this oxygen back into the environment for us to breathe and stores the glucose as energy for the tree to grow. So not only do trees provide oxygen, but they also aid in removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. However, right now there are many threats to the trees in our environment, including deforestation, invasive species, and wildfires. One of the current threats to trees is deforestation, which is essentially the clearing and removal of large forests. This process can occur naturally through wildfires and or natural disasters, but a majority of deforestation is caused by humans. Often it is done to make room for farms, infrastructure, mining, or to use the tree's wood for construction and consumer goods. This process is extremely damaging to our environment. Trees naturally have carbon stored inside, and when a tree is cut down or dies, much of that stored carbon is then released back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. So the mass clearance of forests releases a substantial amount of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, meaning that it captures heat and radiates from the sun and combines it within the atmosphere. This naturally occurring gas is what allows the Earth to not be too cold for habitation. However, man-made actions such as deforestation cause there to be a surplus in carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, resulting in global warming. Now, in addition to the large-scale removal of trees, tree removal on a small scale is also a major issue. Homeowners will often cut down trees for the purpose of beautifying their lawn, with a disregard for the environmental impact of their landscaping. Moreover, many towns undertake redevelopment projects that involve cutting down large amounts of trees without considering replacing them. While many people might think, oh, well, it's only one tree, it doesn't matter, or it's only our town that's doing this, we must ask ourselves, what if everyone thought this way? We must consider how all of these individual tree removals will add up to become a substantial amount of tree loss. Another big threat to our trees are facing are invasive species. Invasive species are organisms that are not native to an area but are able to multiply rapidly and outcompete with the native species there. There are many invasive plants and vines that attack trees by strangling them or by outcompeting with them for light and nutrients, which is why it is key that we are able to identify them so we can save our trees before they do too much harm. A last major threat to our trees are wildfires. With global warming and the climate crisis, there have been increasingly more droughts in the world, and with global temperatures having risen, wildfires are able to develop much easier and quicker. Wildfires are another source of large amounts of carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere, further contributing to global warming. However, on the bright side, there are many lifestyle changes that you can make in your day today to help trees. Instead of buying books from the bookstore, get your books from the library. This is a great way to reuse books and reduce your paper consumption, which is important as paper is made from trees. Consider printing paper double-sided instead of single, or saving scrap paper for later. Another tip to help save trees is to reduce your meat consumption. The reason why this helps save trees is because large forests are often cut down to make room for animal grazing pastures and meat production farms. So if we can decrease the demand for meat, companies will need to decrease their supply, meaning they will need less land for their farm, overall saving more trees from being cut down. Many people think that eating less meat needs to be an all-or-nothing decision in order to make a difference. This mindset often leads it to be harder to sustain a meatless diet. That is why, if you are unable to fully cut out meat, try cutting out meat only once a week and having, for example, a meatless Monday. These small changes may seem insignificant, but can make a very huge difference, especially if many people implement them into their lives. Now, as for wildfires, if you happen to build a fire while camping or having a cookout in the forest, make sure the flames are fully out before leaving it unattended. If you are smoking...
I have a question.
Yes.
Since you talk about wildfires, right? So, as an EMT, as a firefighter, you're saying that because of scout programs, that how are scouts supposed to learn how to do fires? How are scouts supposed to learn how to do survival skills? How are scouts supposed to be able to learn how to build fires in the middle and how to stay warm? Because on top of it, I work for United States Navy, natural disasters, sick people. I deal with pretty much police. So what you're saying is that if we can't build fires to stay warm, then why not? Then why? My question is, why are you saying that that fires are from trees and from other people when people who are responsible for fire are the people who literally can't get up when they're going to sleep?
Thank you. That is actually a very good question. Are you asking about in terms of keeping you warm and how you need these fires in order to stay warm?
So my question
tries to safely, you know, you can't help if flip or anything could happen. You could be in the park, you could do all the things you can, but my experience from my son growing up in the Scouts and my niece growing up in the Scouts is that there's someone trying to teach them safety methods of containing that fire, what they're supposed to do, where they're, you know, supposed to locate themselves in case of wind and so forth. So I don't know if that helps you or not.
And Olivia's going to ask the question later when we have Q&A.
Thank you, though, that's a very good question.
Yes.
Thank you for answering. I would like to say that in regards to wildfires, if you are smoking, make sure that when you throw away the cigarette butt, don't throw them away on the ground, and instead put them in water to be sure that the flame is fully extinguished, and then throw them in the trash. Finally, one of the best things you can do to help trees is to plant more of them. There are many organizations that work towards planting trees where you can volunteer. One example is Tree Plenish, which is a youth-led nonprofit that works with middle and high school students across the country to help them host tree planting events in their community. Over the past 3 years, they have worked to plant over 90,000 trees, saplings across the country. Tree Plenish, along with many organizations, work towards planting more trees throughout the United States and internationally, so I highly encourage you to get involved. I would also be sure that if you are planting a tree, to make sure that it is native to your area. Different trees rely on specific environments to thrive, which is why it is crucial that they are planted in the appropriate soil and climate so they have the nutrients they need. Over 15 billion trees are cut down globally each year, and with trees playing such a key role in fighting the climate crisis, this is devastating to our environment. We must think globally and act locally to do our part in saving our planet. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Alanya raises for us in our small community the issue of what's happening in South Orange and Maplewood. We have a shortage of tree coverage, and we're in the process of replanting shade trees. This spring, 150 trees will go into public spaces throughout South Orange. Alanya is into the Tree Plenish and just sold. How many trees did you sell? So 550. So Alanya efforts will bring 550 more trees in addition to the 150 that will be planted by the town. And for that, we're very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I am pleased to welcome Bryce Letha, who is a junior at Seton Hall University, majoring in political science and minoring in environmental science. Bryce is captain of the Bronson Speech and Debate team, and he and his teammates just returned from a national debate competition. Where were you guys?
Oh, we're placed 19th in the nation.
Bryce is from Boise, Idaho, and spent most of his childhood in and around national parks. He took a course with the philosophy professor Judith Stark, who's here with us today. Is that so, guys?
Discussions, but not of course.
Okay.
One day.
And Bryce became aware of the prevalence of climate anxiety and has a great desire to do something about it. Thank you. Can you share your thoughts with us?
Clover Hogan moved from Australia to London for university. And like many first semester freshmen in college, she was filled with feelings of despair, hopelessness, and overall missing her home. But unlike many other freshmen in college, where those feelings are valid thanks to classes. Sorry, Dr. Stark. But Clover's worry was because of her home. Because back in Australia in 2020, Australia was experiencing some of the worst wildfires on record. Before then, Clover didn't realize it was climate anxiety. But this is a problem that is plaguing the future. As according to Time of November 22nd of 2023, around 7% of American adults have climate anxiety, and 2/3 of American adults are or at least in some way worry about climate anxiety. And I'm sure many people here are, especially after hearing the speeches before me. And furthering this point is on CBS of March 2nd of 2023, saying that in a survey of 10,000 people ages 16 to 25 from across the world, 62% reported having climate anxiety, while 45% said that their daily feelings on climate change impacted their daily lives. Climate anxiety is not just a new phenomenon or worrying a small group of people. It's what my generation and the generations following us is going to have to deal with. Because climate change is inevitable at this point. But we don't have to be anxious about it. So let's quickly discuss what climate change is, the problems with it, and a few solutions, as well as a new term we should know. So first, climate anxiety is basically exactly what it sounds like. According to Yale professor and clinical psychologist Sarah Lau, she defines climate anxiety as extreme distress about climate change, both in the present and long-term futures. Because when we're thinking about climate anxiety, it can spiral into what the next generations will look like. So essentially, it's exactly what it sounds like, being anxious about the climate. However, those most affected by this issue, as I mentioned earlier, are younger people. But it's also anyone in marginalized communities. As according to National Library of Medicine on August of 2021, those from lower socioeconomic groups or marginalized communities are most affected by climate anxiety due to the disparity already prevalent in our social support systems. Climate anxiety is already hurting the marginalized groups who are going to experience the effects of climate change first. So we need to know what it is in order to deal with it. That way we can actually work on solving the problem of climate change rather than focusing on our anxiety about the problem. So climate anxiety in itself is a massive problem. But also how we talk about climate anxiety is another problem. And this comes to us from an award-winning psychologist and leading expert on climate anxiety, Dr. Thomas Doherty, said on January 7th of 2022 that there is no way to cope with climate change, which, worst leading expert of all time, but he's right. Climate change is inevitable at this point. And so, in a CNBC article on June 30th of 2022, Doherty recommended for young people that we turn off our phones and go outside. Now, if you haven't heard what's wrong with that, those are the same solutions my mother's given me before. And my mother is a great expert at many of things. Climate anxiety is not one of them. The issue with Dr. Doherty is these are the only solutions he presents to those with climate anxiety. Turning off your phone and stopping all the news alerts of the latest wildfire will certainly help with climate anxiety. And going outside in the lovely spring weather will also help. But the issue is these are the only solutions given to young people. It's all we're told to do. But what should we do when we actually step outside? That's what I'm here for. So there are things we can do to solve our climate anxiety. For example, Clover, in order to deal with her climate anxiety, founded a local nonprofit called Force of Nature, which was focused on helping young people connect to their community to solve and plant local community gardens or get involved in the community today. This inspires our own solutions, and I have three. So the first solution we can do to help with our climate anxiety is just to get involved, or just to talk about it. According to the National Health Service, talk therapies are great at managing feelings of anxiety and stress. So, go to groups like Climate Awakenings or the Good Grief Network. Both are groups where you can go online and talk about your climate anxiety, or with Good Grief Network, you can get the resources necessary to start your own talk groups for your own local communities. The second solution is very obvious. It's get involved. Things like this are perfect. One such way we could get involved is through the National Wildlife Federation. As one of the things they do is they certify gardens, as when you plant enough native species in your garden, you can make it an ecosystem for the local surrounding community. And you can even get these gardens certified. Essentially, with this second solution, that's just an example of how to get involved. But any activities of getting involved, such as this, is perfect for helping deal with our feelings of climate anxiety. Climate anxiety is complex, but by facing it, we can actually start to treat. But the third and final solution is just to listen with compassion. According to Nature.com from 4 days ago, nearly 40% of all young people said that they feel dismissed or ignored when they brought up their feelings about the climate. It's simple. We just need to let young people air out their grievances. This is an earth we have inherited and will work to become better for it. But we also should be allowed to share our frustrations. And so thank you so much for enacting the solution for the rest of the speech. You all listened fantastic.
I'd like to invite the audience to respond to what you've heard and to ask questions. Please direct your questions to a specific presenter.
Get things started. So we really encourage members of the audience to just come right up, and there's so many wonderful areas of discussion, and everybody's learning, everybody's asking, so no question is wrong. So please do kind of line up and be ready and just come forward. I'm going to start with a question for Alanya, but really everybody. It's something that I've learned about in the last maybe 3 years, and that's a kind of very dense planting of forests that can happen in every municipality. The word Miyawaki is the name of an ecologist, Japanese. It's just a good name to learn, partly because 1 week ago there was a new mini micro-forest, a Miyawaki forest planted in New York City on Roseville Island, and they planted 1,000 small trees that will be a mature forest in 10 to 20 years. So my question to the panel and to Alana is, if every municipality in New Jersey did this, we could have 565 forests. That's a major thing for pollinators, for capturing sunlight, for preventing re-radiating heat from dry soil. So where would you love to see a Miyawaki-style forest in your hometown? Where would it happen? And then somebody who's in South Orange, where would it happen in South Orange? Just to get our imaginations going.
Thank you. That is such a good question. I love talking about microforests, especially because they are so incredible, especially in urban communities where we are lacking trees. I would really like to see it at Columbia High School, if that's possible, or in that surrounding area. Especially over recent years, we have been losing green space at Columbia High School and on that campus and in surrounding areas. And also, it is a heat island, and trees and microforests greatly help with heat islands and decreasing those temperatures. So I would really like to see that in that area, the area near Stop and Shop, and where the Link Gym is in that whole area. I would really like to see there be more trees there. That would be an incredible place to have it. That's a great question. Thank you.
And we should also clarify that mini forest is something very specific. It can be 6 parking spaces, so it could be just right in front of the church. So Bryce, where would you like to see it on campus or near campus?
Yeah, Seton Hall has a very big green area in the middle of our campus, which I would love to have a few more trees for. But also, there's like a space like right across the church where they just cut a bunch of trees, right? But that's like a perfect example where we could have a green space. Like, it's already green and treey over there. And I saw they cut a few of them down after my freshman year here, so probably like right outside of these doors would be a great spot for them.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
They're going to say where would you like to see it in Melbourne?
Similar to Alanya, I'd like to have one by my school as well, because trees are known to help with water clogging as well, I believe, and we have a lot of water just sitting in front of our school after the severe rainfalls that we've been having, and personally, I've seen too many students just slipping and falling and injuring themselves because of this. So if we could have a forest there that not only helps clean up the rain, but also helps provide a better ecosystem and biodiversity for that area, I think I would agree with that.
I think that one place that would be great where we could have some of these mini forests would be like just local parks. Since large areas such as parks, they have enough space to set up these mini forests that you mentioned. And they not only help the environment, but also it would also be some sort of attraction for the people who are living there, make parks more popular.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very informative. My question is, and this is sort of through a behavior modification, how do you shift communities, families, neighbors to perhaps plant a tree or to adopt a new behavior? So perhaps, I'm not sure who can answer that, but perhaps you could share about getting more trees, since we're losing trees in our neighborhoods.
I think the best place to start is always from a place of compassion and kindness. Not everyone's going to have the ability, whether that's the energy or the funds, to go plant a tree or their own garden. So I think that's what is necessary to be conscious of. But I think just talking about it, getting the conversation is the most important part, because you guys are all here, you guys all clearly care about the environment. A lot of people care about the environment across all walks of life. They just don't realize it. So just talking, I think, is the solution, as simple as that. We all realize we're on this earth, and I think we all realize we need to better the environment. Sometimes it's just hard to believe that we can do it.
I agree. I think that's a very, I think that's a good solution as well. And I'd also like to ask, this is a very good question. I've also found that doing tree planting, because I agree that not everyone is able to, doing them through organizations that have these free tree planting events, but primarily doing them with your friends, with your family, and making it sort of like a fun event and sort of more, as opposed to like, we're planting trees, you know, not everyone enjoys getting their hands dirty, and it sort of feels more like a chore to some people. But if you turn it into this fun hangout with your friends, and oh, we're going to plant trees together, and this is going to be this fun group activity, this bonding activity that you can do with your friends, you can do with family, co-workers, I found that that really helps, and it becomes a really enjoyable experience and much more like a memory, a fun memory that you guys all had together. And it's a great way to get all ages involved in tree planting, so I think that can also help if that answers your question.
And I believe this was brought up with you guys numerous times, but another solution would be planting native plants, because the flowers that we invest in most of the time, that they're very not economically sustainable, they're expensive. You need to buy the fertilizer and the new soil and the nutrients and everything you need to do. But for native plants, since they're adapted to the climates that we're planting them in, they grow so easily and you barely need to do anything, just plant them and let them do their thing. So that's an economically sustainable alternative that's environmentally friendly for those who are not able to plant trees, which is kind of hard to do.
Thank you very much.
Before we get to the next question, I just want to, all of you are here, and if you go out and tell your neighbors about how you feel about the environment, if everyone brought one person, and as our young panelists have said, getting involved, we have lots of shared activity in town that we don't see our residents. We have clubs that people can join. Bryce brought up the idea of compassion. Sometimes when you talk to your friends and neighbors about your interest, if we do it with compassion and understanding, and we invite people instead of being critical, we'll get a lot more follows. And there's simple things that we can do. Talk to your friends about the fact that you're not buying new clothes, or that you're buying clothes made from plastic or sustainable materials. I always say walk the walk, change your roof, get solar panels, plant native species, encourage your children and grandchildren to come out and be in the yards with you, point out birds, join the Audubon Society, join native societies. These are simple things that we can do as individuals to change our lives.
Thank you all. You give me hope, and I know that you're going to figure something out, but we need to help you. So starting with Bryce, I wanted to ask you if you could ask the adults in this room who helped put us where we are in terms of climate change, each of us to do one thing. What would it be? Would it be a piece of legislation, buying a tree, switching to reusable water bottles, but just one thing that most people could do if they really were committed? What would that one thing be? So Bryce, can we start with you?
Yeah, Yeah, you're good. Yeah, that's a great question of like the one thing we can do. And I think it's like, I wish I could give like a, oh, if everyone did X, it would be solved immediately. I think the solutions are going to have to be personal. We all have different access to which solutions we have available. So for example, I went to the event on the campus, I saw Dr. Stark there as well. That was all just about native species, native plant. You're going to hear us talk a lot about native species. They're so important for the environment. Get over your gardens being perfect. They should be eaten by dogs. You want that. But like, if the best solution is using a reusable water bottle for you, perfect. If it's planting a whole new garden because you have the funds and the means to be able to, even better. If it's getting out and knocking on door drives, even better. Any small bit helps. So any solution you can think of is a solution you should be enacting for yourself. That helps. And that
I think that's actually such a good question. I appreciate you for asking that, Lois. I think one very specific thing that I've noticed in our community, especially in New Jersey with the plastic bag ban in grocery stores, a lot of adults go grocery shopping. And when you're going grocery shopping, you bring your tote bag now because you can't have a plastic bag. And one of the issues I've seen is that people will bring a tote bag, go grocery shopping, go home. Next time they go grocery shopping, they're like, oh, I forgot my tote bag. Let me just buy another one. And then over time, there's we have 20 grocery, tote bags in your car, and you're like, oh wait, I forgot my tote bag at home, and I need to buy another one. And it essentially defeats the purpose of the plastic bag ban, because then at that point now, you're using so many tote bags that are end up going to waste because you only need one or two for your shopping. So I would definitely recommend keeping that in mind when you do go shopping for anything and remembering to bring your tote bag. I recommend just always keeping them in your car. That's what my family does. We always have them in our car, or right at the door. It's when we go out, so you cannot forget it. And I would definitely recommend doing that. I think that can make a really big difference. And also speaking to your families if you have a chance, and just having see eye to eye on certain topics.
Another thing we could definitely do is kind of something like this, education. So there's a lot of things that go on with climate change. It's a multifaceted issue. We have native plants that we've been talking a lot about recently, but then we also have microplastics and nanoplastics that get barely any attention. Then of course we have the under the sea environment because of acid rain and acidification because of climate change. We have so many problems, but they just aren't discussed enough. So what I think that we should all invest in doing is just getting to educate yourself more, attending places like this. It really helps to spread the word and to just make sure that everyone knows what's going on, because everyone wants to help, but they just don't know what the problem is.
I think that one thing that, everybody, regardless of what their economic status can be, they can still make a difference. Well, not everybody has to buy a solar panel. Some people can do very simple switches like buying a reusable water bottle, as you mentioned. Or, as you mentioned, remembering that you have those tote bags. So regardless of who you are, I feel like worldwide, you can always make a difference. And I think that's one thing that many people have to keep in mind.
Thank you so much. Did we get a response? I just want to ask Colin if he has a comment for what's the one thing as a scientist you say that most residents and the general population can do?
Yeah, very simply, vote. Seriously, and there's another that doesn't and has members who think hurricanes are caused by gay people. Pretty simple. If climate change is something we take seriously, there's only one party.
Just one. I think it's the one thing we never think about, how powerful our votes are and how meaningful it is to vote. All our legislation depicts when and what happens in terms of our climate, our farms, our rivers, our streams, and how water is retained or not retained. So thanks a lot for bringing that forward.
And we'll just go at every level too, because all politics is local, and it starts with city council
very soon in reference to leaf blowing and gas-powered leaf blowers. So if you care about our planet, and if you care about how things change, please support us in moving away from gas leaf blowers and moving towards battery-operated and electric blowers. These are the small changes that we can make. And Colin didn't even know that this is happening in South Orange. Thanks, Colin.
I am going to recommend a book to all you young people and tell you the story of how I picked up this book. It's called The Man Who Planted Trees, a story of lost groves and the science of trees and a plan to save the planet by Jim Robbins. It's an extraordinary book. I had no idea that I actually had it in my stash, but the New York Times brought out a supplement on environment, and one of the articles in that supplement was about trees. And how did he get to write that article? Was because he read this book and found out what actually this man called David Millard, his experience had been like a near-death experience. He thought he had died, and then he came back to live because he had a job that he still had to do, which was to plant trees. Not just plant them, but to clone them. Because some of these very old trees needed to be propagated, and that's been his life's work. And this whole book is about how many different people he met in different countries and where he decided to plant the trees, not just in the coast of California, but in other countries like Australia, in Ireland. And he found all these spots which have the proper nourishment for those trees, and those clones have actually been growing. And it says in the description of the book, more than 20 years ago, David Millard, a northern Michigan nurseryman, had a near-death experience in which he was shown an image of a devastated earth. Its trees were dying, and without them, he was told, human life was in jeopardy. He was tasked with cloning the champion trees of the world, the strongest, oldest trees, and reintroducing their hardier genetics into our sitting forests as a way to combat climate change. And it also gives you the story of each tree and what the genetics actually tell you. And each tree has a story and a history, and it also has a different method that you have to use for cloning that tree. And Anya, you're probably familiar with my granddaughter, Hannah Morris.
Oh my gosh, that's your
Yes,
I love her.
And I have been reading this book and telling her as soon as I finish it, she has to read it and then pass it around to the whole environmental group, because there is knowledge in here that I had absolutely no idea about. I thought a tree is a tree is a tree. But this gives you the history and the story and the whole life cycle of different types of trees that I hadn't even heard about. So you need to hold on to this. I'm going to give it to her and ask her to pass it around, and she'll probably bring it over to you. So please have it.
Thank you, Colin.
Okay, do you want to?
I can talk a little bit about that. The tragedy of climate change is that the folks who are least responsible for the climate crisis are the ones facing the brunt of climate disasters. That's both true here in the United States and across the world. And almost at every level, you can see evidence of environmental injustices, whether it's where we send waste, where we construct roads, where trees are taken away from communities, where erosion is happening. All are generally at the cost of the folks who are not responsible for the climate crisis. And if we're going to build a better future, it needs to be one that takes those facts into account and creates a more equitable future for everyone.
I think that is such a good point, and I actually completely agree. It is absolutely the communities those are the communities that are being most heavily impacted by climate change, and I think that oftentimes, I think we need to, number one, empower and give voice to those communities. And there are a lot of organizations, thankfully, there's the New Jersey Tree Foundation, specifically in relation to trees, because there are many communities who are the most heavily, that are most in need of trees, have the fewest trees, and are the ones being most heavily impacted by the climate crisis, who work towards raising awareness for those communities and planting more trees in those communities, which is really important. And I also do want to shine a light on, in relation to deforestation, there are many indigenous communities whose homes are taken from them because of deforestation, and I think that is something that a lot of people don't talk about as much, but it is happening now. It has been happening for a very, very long time, and I think that is something that we also really need to focus on. There are people who need these trees. These are communities who need these trees to live. This is a part of their culture. This is their home, and we are actively destroying those places that they live in. And I think that is something that we also need. That is an injustice. I think that's something that is important to shine a light on and focus on. But I absolutely agree with everything that was said too.
Yeah, and just to briefly add on to both of those sentiments, this is where Colin's solution comes out great. Vote. It's everywhere. These marginalized communities are being affected by all sorts of groups. And I think the question she was like, how can we help these groups, right? I think one of the first things we can do, and it's something we're taught in our environmental studies course at Seton Hall, is that we need to stop separating ourselves from nature. We're in nature right now. When I stop and walk back to campus in Newark, I'm still going to be in nature. And while it may not be the nature we think of, it is still someone else's nature. I know, for example, my campus has been flooding Ivy Hill, and that's impacting their nature. So vote. If you can, donate money to these places. It's the exact marginalized communities who have been the most hurt and will continually to be the most hurt. While we may experience climate anxiety, those less privileged of us have a different term for their pain. It's called solastalgia. It comes from nostalgia, and it refers to the loss of one's culture and home due to climate change. So keep perspective about that, and hopefully we can help those people in these most marginalized communities the most.
Yeah, another thing I'd like to talk about in addition to culture and just trees and marginalized communities is also health. While most of us here have access to very high quality healthcare, a lot of marginalized communities in developing countries don't. For example, I'm just going to bring up microplastics really quickly. Microplastics are everywhere. They're in the air, they're in the water, they're in our food, they're in our animals, they're everywhere. If you eat something, you're probably going to have microplastics in you. And recent research has also shown that microplastics has connections to cancer, dementia, and Alzheimer's. So while all of us are able to treat that with the resources we have, people in developing countries don't have access to that stuff. They're the ones facing the brunt of all the healthcare-related issues that climate change brings up. In addition, those places places with extreme heat lead to more stillborns in pregnancy, as well as worse maternal and neonatal consequences. So not only supporting culture and tree planting, but also supporting organizations that fight for easier access to healthcare in these areas is also another thing that we should be focusing on.
Hello, I am from a very rural part of the country, coastal Oregon. It is very different than here, and we recently had a wildfire come through the area and burn down a couple of homes. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, coastal Oregon, very impoverished, very poor, and also majorly contribute to climate change, because for many people for work, they have to drive massive trucks or have to contribute to climate outside of their own want for harm, but they can't afford or seem to find a way to avoid it. So as future leaders in climate, living in a very privileged part of the country, how do you think we can reach out across the urban-rural divide and try to speak to people outside of our own cultural areas here in suburban New Jersey?
Colin, you want to address that?
Yeah, that's a really important topic to bring up. I also live in a more rural area, and when I try to advocate for folks to, say, purchase an electric vehicle, I get a lot of pushback because of things like that. They have to commute a long distance. It doesn't perform the tasks they need it to do for their work. And it's a difficult topic. And what I try to find the common ground is to understand that nothing's going to happen overnight, unfortunately. Like the solutions to climate change are varied as the people in this country are. But it's also about understanding just the basic benefits of those lifestyle changes. I asked somebody once, would you want to sit in front of a big diesel exhaust for 5 hours, just smelling that, having your kids around? And of course, any sane person would be like, no, that's clearly you don't want to sit around exhaust. Okay, well, what if we can come up with solutions for something other than that kind of exhaust? We're like, okay, that sounds better. And so it's finding common ground in that, and it's difficult, and it takes work, and it takes practice.
Thanks. Anybody wants to try?
And then I think with that also, I think it comes back to the discussion of the compassion when we're talking about these subjects. Just because, yes, a logger may be doing more environmental damage than some person in the city, but he's also doing it just to get food on the family force table. So I think it's our jobs as urban, moving into more rural areas to help them, is just come from a place of compassion. These are their livelihoods, and they are the people most affected by it. And I think it just has to come from a recognition that, hey, I recognize you're going to be most impacted by this, yet we still have to change. How can I make it easier for you? And it's time urban people stop blaming the more rural population and more so look for ways to help. I think it all comes back to kindness and compassion. I think that's the first step to solving any of this. Create a community of kindness and compassion, and you'll breed more.
Also, another really simple solution, I know you talked about how the long distances you have to travel using cars. Well, a really simple solution would just be using more public transport. Of course, that doesn't only apply to rural areas, it applies to all of us, because each of us drive our own cars, and although we think that electric vehicles help, they really don't. Because when you think about it, how do we make electricity? For the most part, it's by burning fossil fuels. So until we come up with a more sustainable way that's spread nationwide, electric vehicles are almost as harmful as gas-powered vehicles. So just take public transport.
Thank you, Dr.
I'm just so thankful for these young voices adding on to this discussion. And one thing that I would really advocate for is most of us are part of groups. And wherever your group is, involving your group in this effort of helping out in the environment, whichever way that you can. I'm a member of a sorority, and the one thing that our sorority has done for these past 2 years is taking on tree planting. And so we have within the chapter, in the Newark chapter, and we have taken on the goal of planting trees, and next weekend we have an event that we're going to be doing tree planting. And as a matter of fact, Melbourne and Short Hills has an event next week as well, where they're giving away free saplings only to the residents of Melbourne or Short Hills, but you can take it to someone else and allow them to then plant the trees. But it's the whole Arbor Day organization still exists. I'm a rural girl, and I remember it from then. They're still around, and I remember going into the forest, getting things for my mom to make herbs with. And as long as we keep our forest intact, then there's still going to be the herbalists around us able to use these great plants in order to heal ourselves. So get your organization involved. Like you young people have joined organizations, but whatever you are as our adults, make sure that you challenge your organization to do something. And taking up that challenge, I mean, just think, if each person in here went out and made that plea to your organization, I know everybody's part of one, then we've gotten ourselves some real nice little forest planting. Thank you.
Did you want to respond? You guys are very excited. I love your enthusiasm. I like the way you come out here and you kick things off and all. I don't know whether you know that the insight of us old folks, all right, the first organization in the country back in the 1800s, all right, was the Essex County government, because they formed the first commission and government agency that was concerned with the development of the areas, and they wanted areas specifically designated for growth and recreation. You guys aware of that? Essex County Park Commission was the first, even before the federal government, the first organization in the whole country to designate areas for public recreation and to hold back on overdevelopment. Now, one thing that really perked up my ears, and it was kind of, I don't know if it was disrupted, but it was a comment or question. They were talking about campfires and scouting and camping. What went on with that? I kind of missed what happened.
Oh, I was just talking about how oftentimes there are many wildfires that are started due to simple things like leaving your campfire with flames and you leave it unattended and it leads to this huge forest fire that is accidental. Or you throw a cigarette butt, you just throw it in the ground because you're done and there's still flames and it catches fire. And especially with our climate, that with global warming and there are many more droughts around the world, many areas are becoming very dry, and so it's easier for there to be a fire, and the fire can become more widespread. So that was a little bit about what I was talking about with how this is becoming an issue around the world. There are wildfires that are happening, and they're destroying our very much needed forests, and they're destroying communities and habitats for animals and plants.
Oh, okay. I'm a camper. I make fires. I just wanted to have the insight. Okay, thank you very much. And you're very exciting, inspiring, and inspiring. That's good. Thank you.
I just have, my question is specifically for Colin, because it's in reference to, I'm having a little trouble seeing drying situations here in this part of the world. And I'm from New York, maybe lived in New Jersey for a long time, back in New York now. So if there was to be a drought situation, what body of force are going to be
show a decrease in annual precipitation, but what they do show are decreases in seasonal precipitation, specifically in spring and summer. So you combine less precipitation in those seasons with hotter temperatures in those seasons, and that's a recipe for seasonal droughts. New York had a pretty bad seasonal drought in 2016. It cost over $1 billion, billion with a B, in lost agricultural revenue just from New York State alone. And so those are the kind of events that I'm worried about as we continue to run the planet, right? These short-term seasonal droughts. The Northeast has a history of longer than seasonal droughts. In the 60s, in particular, was the most devastating example where the entire New York City watershed almost collapsed. And if a similar event were to happen now, it definitely would collapse that entire watershed network. Where it's a very severe drought from about 1963 through 1967. We don't have many examples of a multi-year drought like that in the Northeast, but we're more focused on those short-term, especially agricultural effects. A lot of folks don't realize how much agriculture we do have in the Northeast. It's a very large industry here, and about 95% of all crops in the Northeast are rain-fed. And so if we had, say, a season of spring and summer with no rain, that's essentially the entire collapse of crops for a whole year. So those are the things I'm here for.
I know we're soon getting to our takeaways from all of you talking amongst each other. I just wanted to mention 3 resource sources that we've become aware of. One is the Great Swamp Watershed Association. It is a great creator of and provider of native plants. And there's a big native plant sale going on right now online, and you can order a starter kit. Is it over?
It's sold out.
But aren't they replenishing this time?
I heard they were sold out. I don't know.
Well, okay, then they'll tell you where else to order. But it is amazing. Just to so you know in the future, you can get starter kits, and they deliver to the town. So there will be a delivery place right here in South Orange and Maplewood. It's just wonderful. So Great Swamp. Another great resource we have is our environmental commissions. And for young people, there's more than 450 in New Jersey. These are volunteers that meet monthly, and when a young person shows up on Zoom or shows up at a meeting, oh my gosh, everybody falls over and says, oh, thank you, this is so exciting. So you have no idea the impact you can have by just finding out when your local environmental commission meets and just show up. And then the third resource I think we all have is supporting our leaders. Mayor Baraka in Newark, big city mayor, huge problems. He has committed to planting 1 million trees. Now, how is he going to do that? I mean, obviously he'll have to look for funding, but one way is tree by tree, street trees. Another way is mini forest, micro forest. We could just call him as our neighbor and say, we want to help. We're going to try to do a mini forest right here in South Orange. Let's just team up and let's do it along with a vacant lot in Newark. I mean, it's just an amazing thing that he wants to do that. So we want to just support those leaders that have daily enormous problems. So very inspired to hear you all. So I personally just want to thank you all for what you've contributed.
Okay, folks, we're about to wrap up. Any takeaways from our young panelists?
Kind of summarize what jumps out to them, or ask each other something that's been sparked by the conversation.
I guess my one is plant native species. Those beautiful green cut lawns are boring, and honestly, I kind of think of them as a little ugly. So be more fun with your yard. Get in fights with your HOA, respectfully. But plant native species, I think, is my idea.
should check out that book. It sounds really interesting. And then also, I completely agree with your points about how, like, the ripple effect and how every action makes a difference. I think we have to focus on that more, and that ties in with the climate anxiety, because everything we do has an effect, has an outcome. So just because we're one person doesn't mean we can't make a difference. And then also, like, the whole thing about how climate change has happened before, but it's the rate at which it's happening. I think that was something really important to consider, because I didn't really realize that it was more about the rate than the actual impacts, because for me personally, I was thinking more short term about, like, what we're actually seeing and not looking at the graph and like, oh, it's happened before, but it's the rate at which it's happening. So I think that was really enlightening for me to hear. And then also for the tree plenish, I definitely want to work on that, because I think it would be really cool to have that in our community as well. So thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, I definitely think I learned a lot. Before this, I knew very little about climate anxiety, so thank you for bringing that up. I definitely have to learn about something new. And for tree pledge, I also heard of that, but I never actually took actions, and that's like a reminder for me to actually take action with that. And I think you brought up a very good point about that climate action is not only something that happens in the environment, but also something that happens in a socio-economic point of view as well. So I think that I learned a lot today, and it was very good.
Yeah, I would just add, you know, I'm definitely not as young as the other panelists, but I'm greatly encouraged always by how passionately folks younger than me are taking this issue, and how they recognize the seriousness of it. And that's something when I'm trying to convince folks to take the action, to think about the burden that's been placed on the younger generations. That not only do they have to deal with the impacts of climate change, they have to burden the responsibility of adapting to it, of being promised a certain kind of say lifestyle, and then recognizing that that lifestyle doesn't fit into the world we need to create for a more habitable planet. And that's a heavy burden that a lot of folks don't take into account. So I'm very encouraged to see, you know, young folks really leading the way and taking this issue head on.
Olivia, could I make a comment?
Sure.
Thank you so much. I so much admire your passion, your dedication, your commitment to really doing this. My generation should have done a lot more, and we knew about this, some of us at least, as early as 1988, even earlier. But that's when James Hansen appeared before Congress in one of the hottest days in Washington, D.C. in 1988. And if people were paying attention, we would have gone on to that immediately. That was also the year that the IPCC was created. And for anyone here who doesn't know what that is, you should look it up, because it is the unit of the United Nations and the World Meteorological Organization that oversees and publishes all the research on science climate from thousands of scientists around the world. All you have to do is put into Dr. Google, IPCC, and you will get what is now the 6th assessment report, and says we better start doing much more quickly. So thank you all very much, and I just want to say my generation, which is what many of us are from, should have been doing much more quickly. And if anybody wants to know, I'll tell you anyway. The one thing everyone can do, if you haven't done it yet, stop eating meat. Thank you. That, by the way, was Professor
that each of your communities has an environmental commission. And in South Orange, our environmental commission has now 3 council members who are passionate about the environment. Bill Haskins, I'm Olivia Lewis-Chang, Walter Clark is now in our DPW, and so you have people here who are passionate. And so my only takeaway is please get involved. Please don't wait another 20, 30 years to then be talking to another generation of young people about how we can change our planet. Thanks for coming, and I will turn this over to Larry Ricardo. Is here.
This has been a great discussion. We're always nervous when we start pulling these together, but we're really happy this year that we brought in the younger generation to talk to us about this. I also want to just say that there's a documentary I saw the other day, which I really encourage everyone to take a look at. I believe it's called Brandy Hellville, The Cult of Fast Fashion. And what it's, particularly when Shreya was talking about how our pollution and what we do to the environment is affecting developing countries where they're not the ones causing the problem, but they're having to deal with it. And there was such striking information in this particular documentary about how all of the fast new trendy clothes that people wear, they're not made very well, so they throw them off quickly, and they end up in these huge piles in Africa, in Asia, and the shores of Ghana are being covered with all of these clothes that are just washing up on shore. It's awful. It's really awful. There are women who are carrying bales of these thrown away clothes on their heads. They're like 3 to 5 times their weight, and they're having medical issues. Their backs are breaking, essentially, from carrying these weights. Please look at it. Brandy Hellville, The Cult of Fast Fashion. It'll give you something to think about and maybe something for us to talk about next year in terms of carrying on this discussion about pollution and how it affects developing countries, how it affects women and their health. And that's all I have to say. I really want to bring up. I believe, Susan, are you next after me to kind of help close out? Pastor Lindsay. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming and thank you.
Yes, and I would be remiss if I did not ask our guest honorees to just stand one more time so we can acknowledge you. We love you, brother, and we're so honored that we are able to remember you on this time, and you have been our inspiration and will continue. As I listened to our guest, it reminded me of our indigenous populations and our places around the world. So the prayer that I will end with is called an Hawaiian prayer. Let us give thanks for the world around us. Thanks for all the creatures, stones, and plants. Let us learn their lessons and seek their truths, so that their path might be ours, and we might live in harmony, a better life. May the earth continue to live. May the heavens above continue to live. May the rains continue to dampen the land. May the wet